excuse me. In the summer of my 15th year, my parents decided it would be fun for us to go on a camping trip to Mexico. Now, at that time, remember I said I was 15, and it was a long time ago. Folks from the U.S., which is where I was living at the time, didn't need to have a passport, but you did need to have a birth certificate to go across the border. My dad and I already had ours, but my mom had to request hers from Nebraska by mail. And I've always been a curious kid, so I loved looking at everyone's birth certificates and marriage certificate. I just thought that was really cool stuff. Perhaps I should have been a bureaucrat. I don't know. So anyway, a few weeks later, an envelope arrives, and I was so excited to open it up and see what her birth certificate looked like. I certainly didn't think that it contained any information I already didn't know, but I, as I said, was very curious. So I wanted to, rip the seal right away in the car, and my mom wouldn't let me open it. Instead, she said, "There's something I have to tell you first." Really? Well, that sounded pretty ominous. So I spent a little bit of time trying to figure out what it could be. I mean, I already knew my grandma and my grandpa. I knew their names, and I knew their birth dates, and I knew where they were from. And I knew where and when, and, all the details about when she'd been born. So what else could there be? Later that day, my mom sat down at the table with me with the envelope, and she started to tell me a story. She said, "When you read the names of my parents on the birth certificate, you're going to see a different name than your grandpa's name as my father." Really? "You need to know that your grandma was married before, and she had me with that man. His name was Robinson, so my actual maiden name was Mildred Robinson, not Wilson. And your grandma doesn't like to talk about it." Okay. I have to tell you, that really did rock my 15-year-old world. I had no idea that this was part of my grandmother and my mom's past. And so as a curious kid, you can imagine that the questions came out of me so fast. Why doesn't she like to talk about it? Did she get a divorce? When did she get married? What happened? Well, where did she meet Grandpa then? When? Is that why she'll never tell me when their wedding anniversary is? Did you know your father? Do you want to know your father? Keep in mind, just for some background, my mother was born in 1927, a time when divorce was very frowned upon, and it was especially unpopular in my family. My grandma hadn't even shared this information with my mom's half-siblings, which had some consequences later on. The whole family, and it was a big one, kept my grandmother's secret for years, and now I was being asked to keep her secret as well. My mom even asked me not to tell my cousins and not to ask my grandmother anything about the past. I'd been given a new treasure and not allowed to do anything with it. I want to let you know that the sermon today, my conversation today about learning from our ancestors, is about the side where you're not learning much. It deals with the impacts of family secrets, and I know that may be a challenging topic for some of you, especially if your family kept information, support, or understanding from you for some reason. So if anything I say causes feelings, please take care of yourself in the ways that make sense for you. Honor your needs. If there's something that causes you to feel distress, then do what you need to do. We've talked about this month's theme being learning from our ancestors, and I know that we usually focus on our themes from that real positive angle about the positive inheritance of wisdom and skills and experience or history that is passed on to us from our elders. The truth, however, is that our families also teach us about what to withhold, what to keep hidden, what to overlook, what to not talk about. And at some point, when we learn of and we start to talk about these family secrets, it creates a set of consequences and things happen. It is fortunate that some families develop really positive ways to react and respond to emerging truths. They confront situations head on, or at least come at it from an angle. They find a way to shed light on what is going on or what has been happening in the family. They find ways to support each other, to talk and listen. They find ways to understand and reconcile what happened. They forgive, or if they don't forgive, they tolerate. It goes on, but eventually they can emerge stronger and wiser to face the future as a family unit. And then, unfortunately, some families, there's just more negative consequences, and it's accompanied by strong emotions and confusion, recriminations, doubts, along with the impact of perhaps changing relationships, potentially being estranged, or brokenness experienced in individuals or in the family unit. Family secrets, I know, cover a broad swath of territory, but all of them involve hiding information from some or all of one's family and perhaps the community. They arise because something happened that caused someone to feel shame or guilt, anger, hurt, jealousy, or some other strong reaction to events that were happening. It may be kept secret to avoid conflict, to protect someone's feelings, to smooth over trauma or pain, to buffer shame or guilt. Perhaps it's seen as important to maintain the family name and not tarnish the reputation of your family and the community. Sometimes secrets keep peace in the family because when there are differences in perceived power or influence or importance, well, perhaps it's easier to just pretend like it's not happening and to hide things rather than to go and confront it and face whatever might be there. If you or your family have secrets, it may be no small comfort to know that you're not alone. If you have friends that you've talked to over the years and gotten to know on a deep level, you find out that other families had trauma and problems and issues too. And of course, we only have to look at the stories that are told. Films, television, news stories, websites, social media, all of those abound with stories of families throughout the ages who have felt the need to keep secrets. It happens in all cultures, all over the world, through all of the millennia. It just seems to be a human reaction to a challenging reality. It's not a coping strategy that's unique to you and your family, although your experience of your situation is unique to you. So in that example from my family, the repercussions of my grandmother's secret, for me personally, were not too significant, I don't think. I loved her and my grandfather. I was so fortunate to get to spend a lot of time with them when I was young. And finding out this secret of my grandmother's didn't really change much about my relationship with them at all, as far as I can remember. We had a good, solid base. I wasn't thrilled about a secret thing, but I still really loved her. And I did eventually ask my grandmother if we could talk about her first marriage and what had happened. She was reluctant and then finally said, well, I got married at 17. And while I was pregnant, I got pregnant right away with your mom. And while I was pregnant, my husband had an affair with my cousin. I felt devastated, and I just couldn't remain with him. So as soon as I could, I took your mother, and I left for another state, and I didn't tell him where I'd gone. Eventually, he found out where she was, and they divorced. And eventually then, in a place where my grandmother worked in another state, she met the man who became her second husband, my grandfather. They married and they had 3 more children, and by all appearances, they had an okay life. You know, they had their troubles and they had their problems, since it wasn't perfect, but they were happy and it was a good life. But one of the consequences of her decision to never talk about it was that, as they will, eventually her children learned that their beloved older sister had another father and that their mother had been divorced. Keep in mind, from her era and from her set of values, my grandmother constantly railed against premarital sex, divorce, go down through the list. So finding out that she had been divorced was a conundrum. I don't think anyone blamed my grandmother for getting that divorce, but they did feel betrayed by her choosing not to disclose this to them. And I know that it led them to wonder what else she had kept under her hat. And it's challenged in some ways their sense of relationship and identity with one another and their trust in their mom. I know it is said that some family secrets go to the grave with the individuals involved, but more often than not, secrets eventually come to light. Because if your family isn't talking about it, but people in the community know about it, somebody's talking about it. Things like addiction, abuse, abandonment, trauma, fear of a family member's anger or behavior, these and other secrets leave deep impacts on people's mental, emotional, and physical health. And then when secrets are revealed or shared or hinted at, well, we're left with the task of managing that emotional, physical, and psychological impact. It can take then time and effort and resources to identify a path to healing, and then to have the commitment and the caring and the perseverance to follow it to some resolution. There is the aspect of chronic stress that comes into our lives from enduring a negative family situation, and that can lead us to have physical impacts all of our life with illness and symptoms, mistrust, suspicion, split loyalties. Those strain relationships and make authentic connections difficult or impossible to achieve with our family members, our neighbors, others around us. Finding supportive and helpful people to help us process our emotions and those situational impacts, as well as helping us get some kind of objective perspective on the situation, well, that's just of immense help when we're trying to heal and recover and move on into the future with the knowledge we now have. Perhaps you were in a family that kept secrets. And I don't mean to be real negative about this, but I sort of think every family has a couple things that they'd like to keep under the doilies on the buffet table or something. I'd rather not talk about that. Yeah, your uncle. And perhaps in that family situation, you were even the one who courageously chose to be the truth teller, to ask questions, to confront the situation, and bring that family history to light. And the first thing you have to do is manage and deal with and face your own reaction, your own range of emotions, and think about how you're going to cope with the situation and how your relationships might change. And in those moments, what you really need is to find somebody to talk to. You can read about others who've had traumatic family situations, and feel validated that you're not alone, but speaking your own truth is a very important part of the process for coming to a decision and a comfortable place with how you're going to go forward. And it's also great to find out that you're not alone, because holding a secret in a family can make you feel very isolated and very alone. Because you can't turn to anybody in your family in that case and go, do you know this too? What are you doing about it? If you are the one observing the consequences of secrets in your own family, you're going to need or want to identify other family members who can help share your understanding of the situation. They can serve as resources and allies as you take this momentous step for your own health and well-being. Certainly, our initial reaction to finding out secrets is going to be something that looks like shock and disbelief. It certainly was mine. I had, again, no idea that this was a part of my grandmother's background or history. And frankly, I think that by keeping it a secret, it actually felt more shameful and icky, perhaps, than it needed to be. But that's my perspective, not my grandmother's. After those initial feelings, as we begin to review the situation and encounter the truth, we will find ourselves confronting information that will need to be integrated into our new story of our lives. It's not about forgetting the past, but finding ways to live more wholly and transparently in the present and taking those skills with us into the future. I know in those moments we have to be patient and compassionate with ourselves. So let me close this sermon today with these words from the blog at the website freedomwiththerapy.com. Kristen says, when family secrets are revealed, individuals in the family unit learn about the importance of open communication, the complexities of human nature, and their capacity for resilience. The revelation can have both challenging and transformative outcomes, ultimately providing a more complete, authentic understanding of the family narrative. And while the process can be painful, the revelation of family secrets forces a confrontation with reality that can, with time and effort, lead to redemption, healing, and a more authentic family story. I offer you my blessings as you consider the narrative and the heritage of your family, and I pray for healing, peace, and authenticity.